stretch of road would have to be elevated. I'm clicking.
Oh, wait. There we go. All right.
So this is an example of ground elevation. This is one of the homes. Woman bought this after Irene. The bank had taken a foreclosure on it, and she bought into it without any knowledge of the flood elevation needing to be met. So she basically stuck with this, and then when she came in to get a building permit, and these are approximations, we don't remember exactly what the number was, because Warren's not here, I don't have a record of it. Looking at the flood mapping, so this is a profile for that area, and this is about the location of that home. So you'll see it's about 695, and ground elevation was 685. New York State requires that you do 2 foot of freeboard above the flood elevation. So, so that's how much higher that house would have to go up. So, which kind of looks. It's also floodway. So floodway requires that there's no rise certification. So that means you can't affect the floodwaters or make them rise in any way, shape, or form. So you have, it's like throwing a pebble in a bathtub. You got to make sure it's as tiny an imprint as you can on the flood elevation. Makes it difficult. So most likely that would have to be built up on piers. And I don't know if anybody wants to sit in that house when the flood comes and you're sitting on a pier and hoping that it holds on.
So what's going to happen to it, honey?
What's going to happen? I'm going to turn it over to representatives from DOT, and they're going to go through what they've got.
Was your question with the house or with the house?
With the house? Well, put everybody there in touch with DEP. DEP offers a local flood buyout if they chose not to partake in the FEMA buyout or follow through with the FEMA buyout. DEP has a program that makes it available for them because of inundation, because of the effect. We've had a couple of other properties after Irene that have gone through this process and have decided to sell out as well, so it's kind of nice that they have this program available for people as an option. And that's basically where we're at.
Is that still owned by the Lane family?
No, that one
Yeah.
is owned by a woman, Kyle Steller.
Oh, yes, okay, I remember now.
Sorry. Give me a minute here.
Well, I'll just start off.
Okay, yeah.
Rob asked New York State DOT to come out and give a brief presentation on our bridge replacement project. I'm Paul Tierms, I'm the project manager. I'm assigned project manager because I'm the regional structures engineer in charge of bridges. I have with me here Rich Frusciante, he's the regional hydraulics engineer. This bridge replacement, a lot of times we replace our bridge in the same location, maybe there's traffic implications. There's a lot of reasons why we replace bridges throughout the state each year. This project is driven by the hydraulics, the floodplain issues here, the Route 28 corridor being one of the governor's assigned lifeline corridors in our region here in New York State. And the safety of this bridge here under the flood conditions that you guys experienced in Hurricane Irene. So we came about and got the funding and said replace this bridge. So last summer we had our initial meeting, I believe in July, with the Shandaken watershed group, which many of you know consists of many different agencies that are interested in the flood management in this area. It's the town of Shandaken, Ulster County, New York City DEP, the FEMA agency, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Army Corps of Engineers. So everybody that is environmentally sensitive is involved in this project. So it's a good thing we started our outreach early. It really enabled us to work with Rob in the town, Ulster County, New York City DEP to really try to move forward and consider all our options and all the hurdles that are in our way to successfully replace this bridge. And we know initially shortly after Hurricane Irene, there was a FEMA buyout program that went through these flooded areas. These areas, it's all done by flood elevations and what elevation your house is and your property is. And there was 5 or 6 properties that took the FEMA buyout back when it was offered and took advantage of that. Since that time, we know New York City DEP is also pursuing a buyout option for the properties surrounding this Route 28 bridge. As Rob and Aaron had mentioned, the more we investigated the hydraulics of this location, we realized that Route 212 gets inundated and flooded at a much lower storm elevation than even Route 28 itself. So then our scope all of a sudden had to broaden to say, okay, we can't just fix 28 here and then 212 is under, 10 feet of water. So we did broaden the project out to that way. We were working with the town in getting the message out here to the property owners and the DEP buyout system, that this is a good idea due to the flood elevations and the danger that these properties are in, and even the financial burdens that it could have on the owners and everybody involved here. So we are just in the initial design phase here for the project, which is we do a design approval document which has a lot of conceptual material in it. We do a lot of cultural resources, environmental checks. We do a lot of right-of-way mapping to see property lines and effects like that. We do preliminary hydraulic engineering. And so we are only in the initial phases here, but we want to get the concepts right as we move forward, because sometime this summer we'll start our final design phase, which will be about a 12-month period for us to design the bridge and get it ready to go out to bid next fall of 2019. With all this, Rob asked us to come out. It was a good idea to come out here early on in the process to let the affected people in the community hear of what's going on. The state's coming out here to replace this bridge. We've considered hydraulics. We considered maintaining traffic on 28. We've considered how to maintain traffic on 212. All the flooding issues, and so we have a lot of issues that we're trying to find the best method for, and we're narrowing that down now. And like I said, this project, the structures design that our group will do to design the physical bridge is the easy part. It's the parameters that bridge has to be designed on based on the hydraulics, the height of the new structure. The existing bridge is 340 feet. Rich will go into details. This new bridge will be significantly longer than this bridge to give the Esopus Creek the necessary width and height to carry the design flood elevations. But I'll turn over to we'll answer questions here when we're done, but Rich will give a lot of background and details on where we're at now with this design.
So as Paul said, my name is Rick Shandaken. I'm the regional hydraulics engineer, and part of my job is to design new waterway bridges for the region. So quick stats, the current bridge was built in 1966. It's about 335 feet long, 4 spans, 3 over the channel. The average floodway width along the road is over 1,600 feet. That's the regulatory floodway. But if you the floodway is completely skewed to the bridge. And so if you measure perpendicular, it's only about 10 to 20 feet. Right now, the bridge is too low for what the FEMA flood storm of design is, which is the Q100 storm. And it causes at least a 3.5-foot artificial rise in the water elevations due to the bridge configuration. The bridge overtops roughly at about the Irene storm, but the south approach, where the intersection with 212 is, overtops at roughly the 25 to 30-year storm, as Rob mentioned earlier. So, quick overview of the area, DEC map from 1949. You can see the river actually looks very similar to today, including some semblance of sandbars. 28 was not there yet. In the 50s, 2 large storm events came through. So in the late 50s, Army Corps of Engineers put in the flood control berm, which actually predates the bridge. Then in 1966, the road was put in, and the bridge opening roughly matched the, let's call it the normal channel from the berm to the other bank. And the other portion of the existing road became New York 212. And that's largely how it looks today, except there's some more residences. So the area that New York DOT is concerned about is obviously the general bridge area, both on 28 and on 212. Although it is noted, this being the floodplain map with the pink lines being the floodway and the bridge down here, it is noted that the town and the county are concerned for a much longer stretch than the DOT is concerned. And the hope is that by fixing the bottleneck at the bridge, we can fix some of the problems upstream without doing other alterations. So again, with the floodplain on, local to the bridge, this is the floodway, extends over to New York 212 and significantly wider than the normal edge of the stream on the other side, on the north side. And again, the floodway measurements along the bridge and then perpendicular to the 100-year flow direction. As mentioned, we have the Army Corps of Engineer flood control berm. This is downstream looking upstream towards the bridge, and you can note that the berm is only a couple of feet higher than the actual, let's call it, original ground behind the berm on the downstream side of the bridge. Looking from the bridge downstream, similar, only a couple feet higher. I don't have the best picture up here, but the upstream berm is higher above the original ground than the downstream portion. So the current bridge issues, it's hydraulically inadequate. The bridge superstructure starts getting hit a little bit above 225 in the Q30, Q35 ring. It's about that same flood event that starts overtopping the berm, which then floods out 212 and eventually overtops 28 approach. There's a significant debris load in the Esopus Creek when you have flows like this. As some of Aaron's slides showed, the massive amount of trees that are getting washed downstream. That actually is pushing against both the piers and the superstructure of the bridge, which makes it unsafe to cross, which is why it took engineers to get there to make sure it was safe for all the heavy equipment. The pile caps did get undermined, but the piles are about 50 feet below the stream bed, so there's really no danger of the bridge falling down in terms of the piers collapsing. The main problem is the superstructure could actually get knocked right off of the piers. Above Irene, the water might start actually physically overtopping the bridge and not just the approach. So Irene can kind of be considered that maximum scour storm because water flowing over the road really isn't affecting underneath the bridge. So Esopus Creek gauge at Cold Spring, you can see the days before Irene, and of course Irene itself being the flood of record, but again only in the 275 range at the gauge. If you scale that to the bridge and you make the vertical scale for flow a little better, the bridge opening can only handle less than 60% of what Irene threw at it and only about half of what the Q100 storm flow is at the bridge site. And that's this red line right here. Everything above that red line could not get under the bridge. It was impacting the bridge. So at these higher storm events, not only do you have water in the main channel here, but you have it overtopping the berm, both above and below, or upstream and downstream of the bridge, then overtopping 28 itself back into the creek. This inspection was a couple weeks after the event, and you can see the heavy debris load in the channel and hung up on the underneath the bridge. Just pictures that I think were in Aaron's slide of each pier, and then just strung together. And this has actually a couple of effects. Not only does it create bigger problems for the bridge superstructure from the impact loading, but it also effectively decreases the opening of the bridge by blocking up portions. So the bridge itself may have actually been only 85% effective because of all of the debris blocking up other portions of the bridge. So this is a little backwards of how you would think of it, but if you can see it, it was probably wet in Irene. And it's a little closer to the bridge, as has been seen in several other slides. This whole area was inundated. And again, post-peak flow pictures along 212 here and looking at the bridge from the intersection. And again, that's about where that other picture was taken and all the repairs that were made. So what is the purpose overall for this project? The project objective is to prevent New York 28 from being closed due to flows up to the Q100 storm event. As mentioned, New York 28 has been identified as a lifeline route. Therefore, it is being considered critical infrastructure per the state DOT's updated bridge design manual. So we want to replace this bridge with a hydraulically adequate structure that's going to be more than likely 800 to 900 feet measured along the roadway center line. Because it's critical infrastructure, we're going to add an additional foot for freeboard at the Q50 design storm versus our standard amount, and we're also going to ensure that Q100 flows under the bridge without touching the low port. We also need to make sure that the entire river gets under the bridge, and this is going to require preventing that lateral overflow across 212 and then across the 28 bridge approach. So this either requires raising of the flood control berm, raising of New York 212, or the construction of a flood wall. Raising of New York 212 is the chosen option. It would be roughly 800 to 950 feet along 212 that would need to be raised. And it would have to be raised somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 11 feet.
That's from 28
That-
going back,
Yes, 28 going back,
so you're going all the way to where the first corner is,
pretty much.
right, which is the same elevation
Yes.
as my front yard
Yeah.
right now.
So this is going to provide a significantly wider floodplain at flows above that Q25, Q30 event that currently overtops the berm. It will provide a slightly narrower Q100 floodplain, but by enlarging the bridge opening and removing the current roadway embankment that is currently blocking the water, there will be a significant net decrease in floodplain elevations as a result. The raising of 212 will require the DOT to purchase property. Because of the amount that's being raised, there's no way to build that roadway embankment within the current right-of-way. And we're hoping that this material can actually be provided by removal of that flood control berm and other potential floodplain enhancements so that we can reduce the import of material into the area.
Take it right out of the creek.
It's possible. If we do not somehow impound the water and force it under the bridge, the approach is going to continue to overtop at storm events below Q100. And that's going to result in New York 28 being closed. That's not going to meet the project objectives. New York 28 would continue to overtop at about the same storm as it does now. And if the berm is removed, but New York 28 is not, or New York 212 is not raised, the overtopping would actually be at a flood event less than a 10-year storm. And that's not acceptable to the town or the state DOT. So the conceptual bridge opening right now looks something like this. We replace it adjacent to the current bridge, similar to what's happening in Big Indian. That would enable the current bridge to keep being used for traffic until it's decommissioned. We would be raising, really what's shown here is 212 on top of itself. It's probably going to have to be shifted a little bit because of the road embankment. But that's, and it may not have to be raised this far up, but probably from about here down. Also, we're going to tee up the intersection so that the intersection functions a little better in terms of safety. Just as a separate slide to show how